The girl stood in the massive chamber, overwhelmed by the endless piles of straw. She thought she could feel her heart sinking into the cold stone beneath her feet. How could she ever do it again? She had already used up the only thing of value she had, but the king was cruel, and there was no mercy in his eyes. As the weight of the task crushed her, she heard that same familiar creak. From the shadows, the peculiar little man appeared once again. His amber eyes gleamed as he sized her up, recognizing the fear in her gaze. "What's the matter now, dear girl?" he asked, his voice smooth and knowing. "I can't do this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The king has asked me to spin even more straw into gold, but I have nothing left to give." The little man chuckled softly, his crooked grin stretching wider. "You think you have nothing left? Perhaps there is something you haven't thought of yet." Desperation washed over her, and she searched her pockets, her clothing, but nothing of value remained. Nothing except her ring, a small but precious family heirloom passed down for generations. Her fingers hesitated as she pulled it from her finger, the last piece of herself that she could part with. "This is all I have," she said, placing the ring into his outstretched hands. The little man accepted it without a word. He climbed onto the stool, the same rapid motion of his fingers causing the spinning wheel to turn with a speed that was almost unnatural. Within moments, the once empty room began to glow with golden light, as the straw transformed into gleaming gold before her eyes. When the king returned at dawn, he was even more pleased than before. "Impressive," he declared, running his fingers through the shimmering piles of gold. But once again, his greed was far from satisfied. "Now, you shall prove your skill once more," he ordered, leading the girl to a third chamber even larger than the last. It was filled to the brim with straw, more than she could ever imagine spinning into gold. "Do it again," the king demanded coldly, before slamming the door shut behind him. Alone in the room, the girl collapsed to her knees, tears welling up in her eyes. What could she give now? She had nothing left to offer. It was then, just as she thought all hope was lost, that she heard a familiar voice. "Why so troubled, my dear?" the little man asked, his eyes glinting in the shadows. "I have nothing left," she sobbed. "How can I ever do this again?" The little man studied her for a long moment before smiling, a plan forming in his mind. "If you wish for me to help you once more, I will need a promise, a real one, something more precious than anything you've given before." With no other choice, the girl nodded, though she did not understand. "I promise," she said. "I will give you anything if you help me now." The little man held out his hand. "Then we have a deal." And once again, he set to work, his hands moving faster than the girl's eyes could follow. Golden strands spun before her, filling the room with a radiance so bright it seemed the whole world had turned to gold. As dawn broke, the king rushed in, his greed burning brighter than ever. But when he saw the magnificent piles of gold, his satisfaction was still incomplete. He had something else in mind, something far more wicked, and so the girl's fate, along with the little man's, hung in the balance of a deal that could not be undone. But what would she have to give this time? What would she lose in the end? For 3 days, the queen's messengers scoured the kingdom, traveling to every corner and village, seeking out every name that might belong to the mysterious little man. As the days passed, her hope began to fade, and the weight of the promise pressed heavily on her chest. Meanwhile, the little man continued to appear, each time grinning wider, his amber eyes dancing with mischief. He enjoyed the queen's growing despair, knowing that time was running out. On the 3rd day, just as the queen was about to give up, one of her messengers returned with a strange piece of information. "Your Majesty," he said, "I heard of a peculiar man who lives deep in the forest. They say he dances around a fire and sings a strange song. Some believe his name is something truly unusual, but none know for sure." A glimmer of hope flickered in the queen's heart. She dismissed the messenger and hurried to her chambers. That night, as the little man arrived, his usual smug expression firmly in place, she had one final plan in mind. "Tell me your name," the queen demanded boldly, her voice steady. The little man chuckled and leaned in closer. "Guess, my dear, guess," he said, his smile widening. The queen took a deep breath and spoke the name she had learned. Rumpelstiltskin. For a moment, there was a deep silence. Then the little man's face twisted with rage. His eyes flared with disbelief, and his grin faltered. "No," he hissed, stamping his foot. "You've guessed it. No one has ever guessed my name." In a fit of fury, he struck the ground with such force that the very earth trembled. The queen stood still, her heart racing as she realized she had won. The little man, unable to bear the defeat, vanished in a flash, leaving behind only a wisp of smoke. The queen's joy was immense, but it was mixed with relief. She had saved her child, and the price of the deal was paid. The king, unaware of the true cost of her rise to power, celebrated their new family, and the kingdom continued to prosper. But for the queen, there was always a lesson she carried in her heart. Greed, no matter how dazzling, always comes with a price, one that can never be fully avoided, no matter how carefully we try to make a bargain. The years passed, and the queen's reign grew strong. She ruled the kingdom with wisdom and compassion, careful to never forget the lessons learned from her dark past. The memory of Rumpelstiltskin and the terrible price she had almost paid for her rise to power remained fresh in her mind. Her child, now a young prince, was well loved by the people, and the kingdom flourished under their care. The queen often spoke of the importance of humility, hard work, and the danger of greed. Her people respected her not only for her beauty and wisdom, but for her strength in overcoming the temptations of a deal that could have cost her everything. But though the years brought peace and prosperity, the queen never allowed herself to forget the little man who had nearly taken everything from her. She often wandered through the palace gardens, reflecting on the strange turn her life had taken. The smell of roses and the sound of birdsong brought her comfort, but a small part of her remained vigilant. Her story had become a cautionary tale, shared throughout the kingdom and beyond. Parents told it to their children as a lesson. No deal, no matter how tempting, was ever worth the cost of one's soul, one's future, or the life of a loved one. The queen, now an elder, would sit by the hearth in her castle at night, telling the story to her son and anyone who would listen. "Remember," she would say, her voice soft but firm, "some bargains come with hidden costs. Beware the ones who promise everything, for they may take everything in return." As the years turned into decades, the kingdom remained prosperous, ruled by a wise and just queen. The memory of the trickster faded, becoming just another forgotten legend, the name Rumpelstiltskin lost to time. Yet, deep in the queen's heart, she knew that she had outwitted fate itself, and that some lessons were never truly forgotten. And so, the kingdom lived on, never forgetting the lesson of the girl who had turned her fate around, and the name that had brought a wicked little man's end.